So hello everybody, my name is Vikas Dhayal, and in this video series, as I mentioned in my Telegram channel, that I'm going to teach the entire Shekhar Bandopadhyay to you, and how you can utilize it in your answer writing. I was able to score 163 in optional paper 2. It is one of the all-time highest marks in paper 2, and I was able to get this because of making detailed notes from Shekhar Bandopadhyay and then using them in the answers. So the second chapter I'm going to begin with. The second chapter is called British Empire in India, and here I have taken out in the first page of this PDF. You can see that 9 questions that I was able to identify, which can be answered using this chapter. So so what I did for this particular book, every paragraph I tried to concise it into 2 to 3 statements or maybe 4 statements sometimes, which can be directly utilized in the answers. So let's begin this particular lecture. In this series, I'm going to try and cover the entire Shekhar Bandopadhyay using the notes, and I'm going to teach you how to understand this complex book and how to use that in answer writing. So the first topic that you see, it is 2.1. It is called the imperial ideology. So this is very important. Whenever there is a question which is asked, which talks about any detail regarding the nature of the empire, whether it is about the nature of the empire, how was the empire something that was done deliberately, was it an accidental thing from the British side. So the imperial ideology, beginning from the 1750s till maybe second half of 19th century, the imperial ideology kept on changing, and you can use in your answers that the British policies were actually impacted by the imperial ideology. So the paragraph 1, I'm going to summarize it into 2 statements. The paragraph 1, I gave it a heading. The heading is Fundamentals of Imperial Ideology. So the heading is not given in the Shekhar Bandopadhyay book. This is the heading that I tried to give it. So what were the fundamentals of imperial ideologies? So Britain was trying to expand its empire. It was behaving like an imperialist force. So from the late 18th century, in the first statement you can see, in the late 18th century there was a from the late 18th century there was a greater acceptance of a territorial empire based on conservative values of military. These are the important keywords: military autocracy, hierarchy, and racial insolence. What do we mean by that? So the British, basically, the British society was developing into a society which believed in these 3 values: military autocracy, that you can use your military in an autocratic way, in a very bossy way. You can use your military to dictate terms on colonies and expand your empire. Second thing was hierarchy. You can create hierarchies vis-a-vis the colonial, the colonies where they are going to go and capture, and you are going to place the kings and the feudal lords below you in a hierarchical order. At the same time, that there was some hierarchy that was created, a very good hierarchy that was created in the military force of their own as well. The third thing is racial insolence. Racial insolence, it means that the British started to keep them insulated or separate from the other racial groups that they came across. So they went to America. There they found the Red Indians. Then they went to South Africa, and some parts of Africa they also ventured into. There they also did the same thing. They started keeping them separate from the subjects, from the colonial subjects, and this way they created a sort of hierarchy and a sort of secluded sphere of residence in wherever they went in the colonies. So these 3 keywords you must incorporate whenever there is a question which is directly related to it. So for example, this question I mentioned here, question 9, if you look at it, the British Raj has a deeply racist aspect, and it ultimately existed to protect colonial exploitation. So here you can say, in the beginning you can write this statement only. Okay? From the late 18th century, there was a greater acceptance of territorial empire based on conservative values of military autocracy, hierarchy, and racial insolence. So this is the statement. This is what you need to remember. If you are able to memorize it and remember it in the exam, you can write it in the beginning, in the introduction. These 3 keywords are very important. Look at the second statement that is given. In a post-enlightenment intellectual environment, the British had also started defining themselves civilized vis-a-vis the Orientals and rationalized their imperial vision of the 19th century. So so this statement, let's try to break it down and understand how the imperial ideology worked. So Europe and England, they had seen the intellectual currents of enlightenment where modern life was visualized in a manner that every man is equal, and there should be liberty, there should be equality, there should be respect for an individualism, and respect for a so basically the humanities, the studies of humanities, where human is at the core of any knowledge that you develop. So that knowledge was getting created during the enlightenment period. In this particular period, if you try to do something as barbaric or as autocratic as imperialism, how would you explain that to your audience? How would you explain that to your citizens who are supposed to be enlightened, who are supposed to be accepting of the fact that every human being is equal? So, in a post enlightenment intellectual world, they tried to rationalize it. So, they rationalized their entire imperial vision of the 19th century. How did they rationalize it? They said that they are more civilized vis a vis the Orientals. So, who are the Orientals? The people of Asia, people of China and India and Indochina in particular. So, they said that we are more civilized than the Orientals. So, this is our divine duty to make them more civilized. That's why we are going there. We are going to spread there the light of enlightenment and the Christian light and the values of the modern era. We are going to teach them. This way they rationalize it, and it is extremely important. If you try to imagine the 18th century, it is extremely important whenever the king or whenever the ruler is trying to expand its territory and go and do barbaric things or go and do really and basically do atrocities on foreign people. So the people might not like it. So it is always important that the ruler makes their own people, their own citizens, make them accept that whatever we are doing, it is totally okay. So for that, they rationalized their imperial vision in 19th century. Let me know in the comments as well whether I am going too fast or too slow. I'll try to go as slow as possible because this chapter is really difficult. So this is the first paragraph. Only two things you are supposed to remember. First, there are three keywords: military autocracy, hierarchy, and racial insolence. These were the values on which they were trying to expand their imperial ambitions. The second statement is they tried to rationalize their imperial vision in the 19th century by calling them civilized vis-a-vis the Orientals. So here the paragraph finishes. You can take out these two statements and you can use them in questions which are basically broadly about the imperial ideology, and not just in introduction, in body as well. You can write it. So if a question related to 19th century also comes in, you can basically give philosophical basis to British way of life in India, even if they ask a question related to say William Bentinck, or they ask a question related to suppose Dalhousie, or the way they were trying to expand their empire in the 1830s and 40s. So for example, just to give you a perspective about how did I use it in the exam. So last year there was a question related to how the British policy towards Punjab in the 1840s changed, and how did it actually why did they go and annex Punjab and Sindh. So in the beginning you can say that it was basically it was part of a long process which started in the 18th century, where military autocracy, hierarchy, and racial insolence were already become a part of it. Now the territorial empire was necessary because Victoria had been coronated in 1838, and there was a change and shift in ideology where they started to do aggressive imperialism under this new ruler and new regime. So something like that, if you write, then that will look like an optional answer. Otherwise it will be a general GS answer. So let's talk about the second paragraph. Second paragraph, the heading that I have given to it is initial years of rule and ideology. What does this mean? So how in the initial years they behaved. So the company behaved like an Indian ruler and started double government. So initially, if you talk about like Lord Clive's period in India, and then if you talk about Lord Hastings Hastings period in India, so they did not interfere much with Indian tradition, Indian ways of living, etc. So they just behaved like an Indian ruler, and they started double government. What is double government? So the civil and fiscal matters in the hands of the company. The civil and fiscal matters are there in the hands of a company because the company just wanted to exploit economically the region of Bengal, and criminal justice system was given in the hands of Nawabi in the hands of Nawabi officials. So, as you know, in the 18th century, justice was done according to the Sharia and according to the Muslim law, and for Indian subjects were done according to the Hindu laws, etc. But the criminal justice system was basically according to the Sharia and according to the Muslim law. So they did not interfere with the law and order situation. They gave it to the Nawabi officials, but fiscal and civil matters they took under control. So this is what they did. Not a revolutionary change in terms of Anglicization. So there was no Anglicization that they tried to push. So it was just a basic introduction of their ideology into India, where they are just behaving like an Indian ruler. And if you see the initial few influential figures, one of them will be William Jones, another will be Warren Hastings. So these people actually believed that the Oriental knowledge is worthy of considering, and they set up some, for example, the Calcutta Madrasa was set up to learn from the Oriental knowledge, learn from the Indian knowledge. So there was no Anglicization that was taking place, right? So what you can utilize from the second para, they behaved like an Indian ruler in the beginning. The double government that was practiced, it was just an example of it, right? So now let's go towards paragraph 3. It is teleological construction of India's past. This is a very important keyword. Teleological construction. What is teleological? When you already know what is the outcome that you want to have. So the outcome they wanted to have is that they wanted to convince everybody that what they are doing in India is justifiable. So the ways that you develop just to justify an already preset result, that method is called teleology. So just to give you an example, if I want to convince you that I already have this result in my mind that Shekhar Bandopadhyay is a better book compared to some other book. So B.L. Grover Shekhar Bandopadhyay is more important book than the B.L. Grover. I already have this result in my mind. Now whatever arguments I am going to construct, I am not going to be very critical of Shekhar Bandopadhyay. I am going to be very supportive of B.L. Grover. I am going to be very critical of B.L. Grover. So the result is already there in my mind. So whatever arguments I will construct, they will be based on finding a logical way of argument which can convince people that my result which is preset in my mind is true. So this third paragraph, I have given this heading, teleological construction of India's past. That's what they did. They created a past. They wrote a history which was suitable to their own vision and their own benefit. So what did they do? Let's look at it in the paragraphs that in the 3 statements that I took out from the paragraph 3. Scholars like William Jones studied the Indian languages to restore to the Indians their forgotten culture and legal system. This newly defined nature of Indian tradition was about a glorious India of past being degenerated in the recent present. So this particular way of saying that India's past was very glorious, but recently it has been degenerated. So now this particular vision was developed by William Jones. So he started studying Indian languages. William Jones was an Orientalist. We call these people Orientalists, right? So William Jones was somebody who tried to do teleological construction of India's past by saying that India's past was glorious, but the present, that is the 18th century, it is getting degenerated. That's why, what is the outcome of this argument? The outcome is that the British are trying to help Indians to attain that glorious past again and attain their capabilities, right? And the second statement, look at it. This new knowledge came to be privileged as the most authentic version of true knowledge. See, legitimized by power of colonial state, Edward Said calls it the knowledge thirst from above through the power of Europeans. See, when you are trying to write history, whose history you are going to believe? If somebody who is a farmer who is trying to tell you a history of how society was 300 years ago, you might or might not believe him. But if somebody with authority tells you that this used to happen, then this knowledge you will believe more than anybody else. So these Europeans, they said what they did, the new knowledge that they created about India's past by reading and translating the Indian texts, that came to be known as the authentic version of true knowledge. So this is the true knowledge about India's past. And Edward said, you can take his name, this is an historian who says that a new knowledge was thirst from above through the power of Europeans. The Europeans basically shoved this knowledge down to Indians' throats and said that this is the true knowledge, then this is something that you need to accept. Eugen Etchik calls this knowledge to be a collaborative exercise. However, he believes that Orientalism produced the knowledge of the past to meet the requirements of the present. So, you can also use Eugen Etchik, who says that this new knowledge that was created from the Indian text was created to basically meet the requirements of the present, which is the colonial requirements, and to justify how colonialism was justifiable based on like how India's present is getting degenerated. So these two historians you can use. You can take the name of William Jones, who was the poster boy of Orientalism at that moment of time. So these I'm just going to summarize the keywords. Teleological construction of India's past, knowledge being thirst from above through the power of Europeans, said by Edward Said. Then Eugen Etchik calls it that Oriental knowledge was produced to Oriental knowledge of past was produced to meet the requirements of the present colonial state. That's what the summary of this particular paragraph is. Let's go to paragraph 4. So I'm going to you understood the basics of it. The fourth paragraph says Orientals. So this is the heading that I've given. Orientalist reverse acculturation kinship of the classical past. So they did some reverse acculturation, and they created kinship between Indians and Europeans in a mythical past that was never there. So what they did, they said that Indians, actually the Aryans, came from Europe, and the Aryans are basically, their race is same as ours, so we are brothers from the past, we are the kins from the past. So they try to create a relationship. So when you create a sort of relationship between like two group of people, then your colonialism seems justified. You can say that I am the big brother coming from Europe, I am trying to make you civilized, you guys are living in a barbarian state of life, and we are going to give you the true knowledge, and this is our holy duty to make you more civilized. So they tried to create a kinship in the classical past, in back in the times of Vedas. So this entire theory of Aryans coming from Europe is entirely rejected now, but it was totally accepted in those days because of the power of Europeans thirsting the knowledge down India's throats, as said by Edward Said. So what is reverse acculturation? Gauri Vishwanathan, which is an Indian historian, says that Oriental knowledge allowed them to learn about the customs and laws of subject society for the purpose of assimilating them in the imperial tradition. So Gauri Vishwanathan says that they did some reverse acculturation. She says that by learning the Oriental or the Indian methods, Indian customs, they were able to teach their own bureaucrats about the ways of Indians' life. And that's what was done in Fort William College. They taught their own officers how the Indians are going to behave. They created a knowledge which can be used for ruling India. Although they were saying like what they basically, when you would ask them why are you creating this knowledge, why are you translating these texts, so they would say that we want to give India its past glory, and we are going to show you how India was very glorified in the past, and now the same values we are going to bring through this new rule, this new colonial British rule. So this is what Gauri Vishwanathan says. Use the term reverse acculturation in any question that you can come up with. This is a very important term. So they did they made the culture of India's past according to their own needs, says Gauri Vishwanathan. Next, Thomas Trotman argued that by giving currency to the idea of kinship between British and Indians in the classical past, a rhetoric of love between the two would be established, foundation of providential mission. So if a question is asked related to providential mission, what is a providential mission? The British said that we are here in India to provide you. So providential means providing something. The mission is to provide Indians with a new way of life, which is basically more modern and more acceptable and less barbaric. So Thomas Trotman says that they tried to create a kinship between British and Indians in the classical past to create a rhetoric of love between the two to make the providential mission sound very very good. And as you all must be knowing, since you are students of history, the initial moderate leaders of the late 19th century, they actually believed in the providential mission. Dadabhai Minoroji once said that greater calamity would not befall India had the British have to leave India on its own. So if the British leaves, then it will be a calamity on India, because they are actually doing good to India. They are trying to give us modern life. So this is something that all the intellectuals, all the middle class intelligentsia believed in, because this was the knowledge that was taught in schools and colleges. Yes. So let's move on to the next statement. Warren Hastings wrote that every accumulation of knowledge was useful to the state, as it lessens the weight of the chains by which natives are held in subjection. This is a very interesting and important line. Warren Hastings, who is the governor at that time, he himself is saying that every knowledge that we create is going to be useful because it lessens the weights of the chains by which we have held the natives into subjection. So this particular theory that has been given by Eugene Netschik and Edward Said and Gauri Vishwanathan and Thomas Stratman, it is proven by these words of Warren Hastings, right? So I hope you're understanding what Warren Hastings is trying to say. He is saying that the chains by which we are holding the Indians, we are basically doing atrocities on them. They are going to see them as necessary evils if we create more knowledge of India's past. So let's move on to the fifth para, threat of Jacobinism. So these particular four paras are basically about the whole imperial ideology, on what values the imperial ideology was formed. So you can just rewind the video and see. And now we are going to talk about how the Oriental way of understanding India changed, because there was threat of Jacobinism. So this is the heading that I've given: disdain of Oriental despotism and resulting paternalism of the Raj. So what is the meaning? I'm just going to show you. So what happened in the 1790s? There was a revolution that happened in France. The Britain lost its war of the American War of Independence. So there was a threat of Jacobinism. So what was Jacobinism? So the Jacobins said that they are going to rule on their own according to the ideas of liberty, equality and fraternity. So they thought that this might happen, that the ideas of French Revolution might get into the minds of Indians. So there was a threat. So whenever there is a threat, there is a change in ideology. So now they started to create a new way of basically ruling, that is paternalism of the Raj. What is the meaning? Lord Cornwallis went for greater anglicization of the administration, started separation of power between judiciary and executive. That is the Whigs principle of British government, also supported by Wellesley. So this is extremely important. I'm going to make you understand what is the meaning of Whigs principles. So Whigs was a political force that was ruling Britain at that time. So this political force believed that anglicization of administration should be done. There should be separation between judiciary and executive. One reason was of this attitude was to prevent the ideas of freedom preached by the French Revolution. So how you can make the administration better to make it more anglicized, and using Whigs conservative principles of rule, which basically are about paternalism. What is paternalism? Paternalism is like our father telling us, you cannot overrule me, or you cannot argue with me because I'm your father. So that is paternalism. When the parent says that I am right because I am your parent. Similarly, the company and the British rule started behaving that we are the parents of this rule. So what we are going to tell you is more valuable than what you say. So you can use it. Lord Cornwallis started separation of power between executive and judiciary. He started anglicization of administration, as we had seen before that there was no anglicization in the time of Warren Hastings. But with the coming of Lord Cornwallis, and Cornwallis, as you must know, was there in India in the late 1780s and in the early 1790s. The same philosophy was followed by Wellesley as well. Look at the second statement. From the early stages of Company's Raj, it tried to curb the power of erstwhile remnants of Mughal state to ensure free flow of trade and steady collection of revenue. So, see, from the very beginning, the company was what was they trying? What were they trying? They were trying to basically, so the erstwhile ruling entity in India was the Mughals, right? So they would try and erase the memory of Mughal rule from the minds of Indians. And you can see from the 1857 revolt that they tried so much. Still, when people revolted, they looked at the Mughal ruler for protection and for legitimate rule in India. So obviously Indians were thinking that the Mughal rule was something that they were living under. So they wanted to remove the memory of Mughal rule, so and curb the power of erstwhile remnants of Mughal state. So who are these remnants? Remnants may be officers, remnants may be some symbols of power. So for this purpose, it took utmost interest in surveying and policing the territory, and instead of on exclusive control over regalia of power such as flag, uniform, badges, and seals. So they changed the flag, they changed the seals, they changed the uniforms, they changed the badges, just to basically make the Mughal states remnants less important. So this you can use whenever there is a question which is asked. For example, this question which says British occupied India in a fit of absent-mindedness. There you can give an argument that actually from the very beginning they tried to curb the power of erstwhile Mughal state by basically uh, trying to exert exclusive control of regalia of power such as flag, uniform, badges, and seals. This you can use. Based on the premise that natives were to be emancipated from the corrupt and abusive feudal landlords, a strong state was carved out. William Jones and other officials at that time exhibited this attitude. So let's try and understand this. So there was a premise that natives were to be emancipated from corrupt and abusive feudal landlords. So the British themselves created a past of India where they said that Indian society was feudal in nature. So we need to emancipate them from these feudal lords. So this particular a strong state needs to be carved out based on British values, and William Jones and other officials at that time had this attitude that okay, the Indian system was feudal in nature, and we are more civilized. We have this providential mission to complete where we are going to make them more civilized and make them less feudal. So now look at the next statement. The Georgian state back in Britain was under the threat of Jacobinism. So what is the Georgian state? So it was King George who was ruling at the time in Britain. For example, now till some time back it was Victoria who was ruling. Now Charles is ruling. So you can just say now the British state is Charlesian state. So at that time George was ruling. So Georgian state back in England was under the threat of Jacobinism, and it required upliftment of public profile of monarchy. So what is Jacobinism? Let's try and understand. Jacobinism basically is about a group of people called Jacobins in the after the French Revolution in France. These people did not like the monarchy at all. They wanted an elected ruler. They wanted the France to become a republic, and they hated the idea of basically somebody ruling based on their family lineage, etc. So the Georgian state, so if you have seen the movie, the TV series called Crown, so the Crown always was fearful of the fact that something like Jacobinism might creep into the British subjects as well, and they might say that we want to kill this ruler and we want to become a republican state. So this was the threat. So how did they respond? The issue of uniqueness of cultures requiring change or not tied in an unmistakable way the questions of reform at home and in India. So this is one statement that is given in the book. So there was a debate. So the debate said, one argument of the debate said, so Indian culture is unique, the South African culture is unique, the American culture is unique, wherever you're going forming colonies, the cultures are unique. Do they require change or not? Should they be left according to their own way of living? That's what the Orientals said. And there was another way of thinking which was championed by at that time by Cornwallis and Wellesley and the Whigs, people who believed in Whigs principles of conservatism, military autocracy, and all these keywords that you have seen before. So there was a debate whether we should change the Indian way of life forcefully. So that debate was going on. The process of Anglicization and regulative administration under Cornwallis and Wellesley reflected this conservatism of the time. So this time is getting more conservative because there was a threat of Jacobinism in the Georgian state. So Wellesley and Cornwallis reflected this new conservatism that was influencing the British policy in India. Edmund Burke was the chief exponent of this conservatism. So this guy, Edmund Burke, extremely influential philosopher of the time in the country of Britain. So his influence was a lot on basically process of Anglicization. To validate this ideological shift, Javed Majid has shown a gradual evolution of conservative ideology in the ideas of William Jones since his arrival in India. So Javed Majid says that there was a shift in ideology in the people who are influencing British policy in India, and you can see in this person's views. So he studied his views and he showed that his views are getting more and more conservative. Initially, he used to accept that the Oriental knowledge is very important, the Indian knowledge is very important, the traditions must be respected, we should not change them, these cultures are unique, and all these arguments. Now, under the influence of maybe Edmund Burke, or under the influence of like this new conservatism that is developing in Britain because of threat of Jacobinism. I'm repeating these keywords again and again so that you can utilize them. These keywords are extremely important because this is how India's rule was getting developed based on these ideologies and these influences, right? So Javed Majid's name you can take and you can write that William Jones became more and more conservative. So if in the exam. So what kind of questions come in the exam? Sometimes the first question says critically analyze the following statements. These are 10 markers, and the 10 markers are extremely important. People do not give value to them, but those are the ones which are going to impact your answers a lot, impact your marks a lot. So in those answers, they might ask a very seemingly difficult question where they just say that William Jones and Warren Hastings were basically the champions of Indian tradition and something like that. So you need to give a critique by quoting Javed Majid, who says that William Jones was developing into a conservative fellow. You can see his work. So paragraph 6 we are going to talk about now. Cornwallis and Munro system, respect and paternalism. So let's try and look at from the beginning. So the first paragraph was about fundamentals of imperial ideology. The second paragraph was about initial years of rule and ideology. The third paragraph was about teleological construction of India's past. Fourth paragraph was about Oriental reverse acculturation and kinship of the classical past. Fifth was about Jacobinism's threat and paternalism of Raj, new sort of paternalism of Raj developing in the 1790s or the late 1800s. Now, let's talk about Cornwallis and Munro system, respect and paternalism. This keyword paternalism is extremely important. You can use it multiple number of times and say that paternalism was something that was started to that started to develop in the late in the 1790s and in the 19th century. Eric Stokes has shown two distinct trends. Firstly, Cornwallis system of permanent settlement believed the rule of law and private property would bring about modernization of Indian economy and society. So, Eric Stokes says that Cornwallis was behaving in a paternalistic manner. He said that I know better. I think the existing revenue system should be changed into permanent settlement, which is going to give more revenue to the Indians, more revenue to the British, as well as less exploitation will be there of the Indians. The feudal system, as he understood it, according to that, he made this permanent settlement. So Eric Stokes says there was two different trends. First trend was of Cornwallis, who said that permanent settlement should be done. The second trend was Munro and his disciples in West and North India, such as Elphinstone, John Macallan, Charles Metcalfe, believed that the Cornwallis system did not pay heed to the Indian system and experience, hence they implemented the Rayatwadi settlement for getting inspiration from the system of military fiscalism of Sultan Tipu. So there was two trends. The first trend said Cornwallis said that we need to create a centralized sort of permanent settlement where we are going to hire some huge big landlords, 10 to 12 of them, in the entire land of Bengal, and these people are going to be responsible for collecting the entire revenue. While at the same time, Munro, Elphinstone, Metcalfe, and these people said that this is not Indian tradition. The Indian tradition is that the state should basically directly collect revenue from the Rayat. They believed, we are going to see in the later chapters as well how exactly it happened, but here you can see two arguments of Eric Stokes where he says that there were two systems that were developing. One was the Cornwallis system, another was the Munro system. Munro believed that as Bertenstein argues, that a part of India should be indirectly governed by knowledge and sympathetic men like him with great concentrated authority. This is extremely important. Bertenstein said that, so Bertenstein is an important historian. So Munro believed in Bertenstein. He argues that a part of India should be indirectly governed by knowledgeable and sympathetic men like him. So he said that we need to use the Indian knowledge and Indian system's knowledge and India's past knowledge to rule them. And he said that this can be done by sympathetic men like him. So this particular statement shows paternalism of Munro as well. Thus, respect and paternalism remained two complementing ideologies of early system of Raj. So they gave respect to the way Indian system was done. There was some sort of respect that okay, this is how they used to govern themselves. This is how they used to collect revenue. We can learn from it. And at the same time, they said that now we are going to decide. We are going to behave like a father, a big brother, or a father, and behave in a paternalistic manner and tell them exactly how the rule is going to be. Let's go to the seventh paragraph. It is a very exhausting chapter, but it is extremely important as well. We have reached just 3 pages, and at the same time, I've tried to consolidate and concise the entire book into just 8 to 9 pages. You can read them, and you can get maybe 2 to 3 or 4 extra marks in a question, depending on like how much marks this question is worth. So the seventh paragraph, you can see new ideological currents and new demands. So industrial revolution in Britain in the 1800s required more effective administration and tying of the colony of the economy of Britain. So, what happened? There was a change that was taking place in the 1800s. The change was about effective administration was required because industrial revolution was happening in Britain, and they wanted that they needed to create a market where goods can be sold, and they needed raw material as well. So they looked at India and they said that if we can manage and effectively govern this place, then by using our power we can buy the material raw material cheap and sell it expensive. So that's what the change in policy happened. Pressure of free trade lobby demanding finishing companies monopoly. This is extremely important. People generally do not understand what is the meaning of this statement, but there was a free trade lobby. So if you see the 19th century, there was a these famous thinkers, including Butterstein, Edmund Burke, and Eric Stokes. So Butterstein and Edmund Burke, and if you go later on, then maybe William Bentinck's. I'm not getting the name right now, but yes, Charles Grant was also there. There was a free trade lobby which said that this company only is controlling India's positions. There should be free trade. Everybody should be allowed to go there and trade with India rather than just the company. The crown should take everything under control. The company should be expelled from here, and every company that is there existing in England, they should be given the power to basically trade with India. And because of this particular change in this free trade lobby and this particular change in ideology, if you see the 1813 Act, it was inspired by it. 1813 Act, they basically finished the monopoly of the company and just left it over trade with China and trade in tea and tobacco. So the utilitarian and evangelical ideas called for reform in the subject society and economy to make up for the sinful conquest. So now new ideas are emerging, utilitarian. So till now what we have seen, the Oriental ideas we have seen Whig's principles which are conservative in nature, we have seen paternalism of the Raj, and we can see also respect along with paternalism. That's what we have seen till now. Now comes a new theory, which is the first one we have seen, the free trade thinking. And the second thing we have seen is utilitarianism, and the third thing is evangelical ideas. So just to break it down, some people might not understand what is evangelicalism. Evangelicalism is basically spreading the Christian religion. It can be related to any religion, but at that time it was related to Christian religion, spreading it and calling it more superior. So people in the church who said that Christianity is a superior religion, so we need to spread it. So these people were very important for this free trade lobby as well, because the free trade lobby said that if we want to create a good market in India, if we can convert them into Christianity, if we can change their taste, so then it will be more profitable for us. So why not take the help of the evangelicals who are trying to change their religion and take them there and basically spread the Christian light, and in the name of the Christian light you can actually sell them more material and gain more profit. So at the same time, utilitarian ideas, Jeremy Bentham, his ideas were also getting influential in England. So whoever influences England's ideology influences British rule in India as well. This is what we are going to see. So I think I'm going to finish this particular lecture here only. This lecture is going to take little more time because this chapter is more important than others. So let me know in the comments if I should continue this series or not, and at the same time let me know in the comments did you like it or not. If you want me to change my method of teaching, then you can explain, you can mention that also in the comments. Thank you so much